We're nearly 18 years into this new millennium, and the human race is still lacking a unifying vision of the nature of man and society. Only with a common belief about the path and direction of human society can the foundation be laid for global unity to which the peoples of the world can commit themselves. Baha'u'llah was arrested and brought in chains and on foot to Tehran. There he was thrown into a subterranean dungeon known as the Siyachal, the Black Pit. He and some 30 companions were imprisoned. Over 100 thieves, assassins, and highwaymen were there as well. We have today with us one of the individuals who was with Baha'u'llah in that darksome pit to tell us more about what it was like.
I was there, in that black pit. They threw us in that rat-infested hole and they kept us there for months. And there was no out. The smell, it was horrible. We didn't have any clothing to wear or bedding to lie on, no. And I remember Baha'u'llah with this heavy chain clamped so tightly around his neck that it left scars on his body for the rest of his life. And each day, guards would come in and choose one or more of us prisoners. And they would drag us out right to our very own execution. One by one by one. And in the streets of Tehran, bobbies were being blown from cannon mouths. They were being hacked to death by swords and axes. And they were being led to their death with fire-lit candles being pushed into the open wounds left on their bodies. It would be years later that we would learn from Baha'u'llah that it was in the Siyachal that he received his full mission from God. And he describes this divine revelation in his own words, saying, "It felt as if something flowed from the crown of my head over my breast, even as a mighty torrent that precipitated itself upon the earth from the summit of a lofty mountain. At such moments, my tongue recited what no man could bear to hear." During this time, God also told Baha'u'llah that verily we shall render thee victorious by thyself and by thy pen. So imagine, in these horrific circumstances, God promises Baha'u'llah that he shall be rendered victorious and by his pen. And when faced with such deep despair and death, God assures him that thou art in safety. And we didn't know then the true significance of what was happening in that horrible pit, but we could feel it. In a time of deep despair, Baha'u'llah was our comforter. He was our beacon of light. When faced with violence, Baha'u'llah taught us beware lest ye shed the blood of anyone, and instead taught us to be a treasure to the poor, an admonisher to the rich, an answerer to the cry of the needy, and a preserver of the sanctity of thy pledge. We were all comforted by Baha'u'llah, so much so that we could feel this miraculous new radiance of love. And this love was not just for his followers, no. Not even just his fellow prisoners. This love was for everyone, including our captors. One day, we were told to stand in lines facing each other. And Baha'u'llah, he taught our rows to chant so loud that the Shah could hear us from his palace. And on one side, we would sing, God is sufficient unto me, verily. And on the other side, is the all-sufficing, in him let the trusting trust. And so together, I want you to join me in this black pit, this siyachad. And on this side, please. God is sufficient unto me, verily, is the all-sufficing. In him let the trusting trust. One more time. God is sufficient unto me, verily, is the all-sufficing. In him let the trusting trust. Thank you.
That guy.
Our story continues now. Portraying the life of Baha'u'llah in exile. After Baha'u'llah was released from that terrible subterranean dungeon, the Black Pit, he was exiled out of Persia, penniless, to Baghdad in Iraq. The Shah's government hoped that by sending him away from Persia, his influence would die out, but that was not to be. Now we have a special guest who was there in Baghdad with Baha'u'llah from 1853 to 1863.
I was a follower of the Bab, but after he and thousands of his followers were martyred, I was demoralized. And then I learned that Baha'u'llah was in Baghdad, and that many of the Babis from Persia were crossing the border to visit him. My brother and I came and visited him. We got jobs so we could stay in the area to be near him. Baha'u'llah lifted the spirits of all of us. He taught us the importance of the spiritual and social aspects of God's laws. I've memorized some of his words. One of the things he taught us, O Son of Spirit, the best beloved of all things in my sight is justice. Justice was a central theme of Baha'u'llah's teachings. He taught us that we should be fair and just in our dealing with people, that we should check for truth independently, and that we should never follow anyone blindly. Another of his words, O Son of Being, love me that I may love thee. God loves us all, but in order for his love to reach us, we must turn towards him. Baha'u'llah explained that one of the ways that God shows his love for us is by continuing to send special messengers whose task it is to bring God's love and guidance to us. He said, it is ordained in every age and dispensation a pure and stainless soul be manifest in the kingdoms of earth and heaven. These special messengers of God should be regarded as divine physicians whose task it is to heal a sick mankind. By 1863, Baha'u'llah had been teaching for 10 years. He taught us Babis this special message of the Bab. Well, he became too popular and too well-loved, and too many people were crossing the border from Persia to visit him. The Persian government pressured the Ottoman Empire to move him further away. We were devastated that he'd be leaving us. But before he went, Baha'u'llah called us together for one final gathering in a garden near the city, a garden that would become known as the Garden of Rezvan, or Paradise. And there, among the roses, he confided in us that he was God's special messenger for this day, that divine physician whose teachings of oneness would heal a divided humanity. And the roses. Each morning, the gardener would pile in the middle of his tent all the roses that he had cut that day, and that pile would be so high we couldn't see over it. And each rose was a special gift to someone who came to visit. I wonder if you understand how profound this was. The promised one had come. It had been our ardent desire to witness his advent, and we had. And now, Baha'u'llah was being sent to Constantinople, the heart of the Ottoman Empire. But we knew this would give him an opportunity to spread his teachings. Our joy was complete. On the 12th day in that garden, Baha'u'llah left us, riding through the streets on a red-roan stallion of the finest breed. Many came to see him off, to bow in the dust and kiss the hooves of that horse. 10 years before, loved by many, all of whom understood in their own way his special message.
The decision of the Ottoman authorities to move Baha'u'llah and his companions to Constantinople, the capital of the empire, worried the representatives of the Persian government, and the Persian ambassador asked that the exiles be sent to some more distant part of the empire. At first, the Ottoman government strongly resisted, but they eventually agreed to move Baha'u'llah and his family to Adrianople. The move was made quickly, in the middle of the night, and an extreme winter proceeded. Without enough clothing or other supplies, the exiles endured a year of great suffering. Although they had been charged with no crime and given no opportunity to defend themselves, they were living as prisoners. Baha'u'llah chose this moment to announce publicly his mission. This announcement was made through a series of letters in which he addressed the kings and rulers of the world, announcing to them the beginning of the day of God. He hinted at the incredible things which were beginning throughout the world and called on them to arise to serve the process of the unification of the human race. We have with us now two individuals who were with him during those years to tell us more.
I witnessed it. God speaking through Baha'u'llah. Being present during Revelation is something I can never forget. I was one of Baha'u'llah's secretaries in Adrianople and Akka. When Baha'u'llah would receive revelation, his face would change, as if he were far away. He would speak so rapidly that several secretaries were needed to write down every word that he said. And afterwards, he would look at our notes and correct the errors that we had made in transcription. His letters were complete and perfect the first time. Many of these letters were sent to individual believers. These were loving and inspiring. Other letters he sent to the kings and rulers of the world. These were letters of might and power. He declared boldly who he was and called on them to investigate his cause and to rule justly. In one of those letters he wrote, "O kings of the earth, he who is the sovereign Lord is come." He also encouraged them to remember their true purpose as kings. "Know ye that the poor are the trust of God in your midst." He went on to warn them, "If ye pay no heed, the sentence of his justice shall be pronounced against you." One of these letters went to the Pope, who at the time had a vast army and ruled over a great land. In that letter, Baha'u'llah told him that he must give up thy kingdom unto the kings Well, not long after the Pope ignored that letter, the Papal States were invaded and Rome was annexed by the new Kingdom of Italy. And so he had to give up his kingdom. Time and again, these letters went out to the rulers of the world, and time and again they were ignored. And their empires have ceased to be.
Also received such a letter. But the manner in which that letter was delivered, I can never forget. The Persian government despised Baha'is so much that it was widely known that whoever was to deliver that letter would face certain death. Although several people volunteered, Baha'u'llah refused them, waiting years for the right person. The young man whom Baha'u'llah chose was only a teenager, named Badi. He was so on fire with the love of Baha'u'llah that he feared neither persecution nor death in the cause of his Lord. He took that letter and he traveled, alone, on foot, for 4 months back to Persia. He found out where the Shah was staying in his summer camp and waited on a hill to be found. When the Shah passed while hunting, Badi approached him respectfully, quoting the Quran. "O king, I have come to thee from Sheba with a weighty message." The Shah, realizing that this was a message from Baha'u'llah, delivered the letter to his religious advisors and asked them to prepare a response. They did not, and instead advised that Badi be put to death. The Shah had his chance to recognize the truth, and he refused it. Badi was tortured for 3 days before he was finally executed in horrific circumstances. Dedicated to this noble youth, Baha'u'llah states that the temple of the cause of God was adorned by Badi. This young man had reached an exalted station in service to his Lord. I consider it a sacred privilege to have once met the noble youth, Badi.
It is an honor to present our final speaker, Edward Granville Brown, a scholar from Cambridge University studying the culture and religions of the Orient. As a young man, he came across the Baha'i faith and dedicated many years of his life to studying and documenting the early development of this new religion. He has agreed to come and speak with us today. Your Honor, Mr. Brown.
Yes, as a scholar, I was fascinated with the opportunity to study this new faith. It was spreading like wildfire in Iran, even though becoming a Baha'i meant facing extreme persecution, even death. I realized I had the opportunity here to study firsthand the early history of a new world religion. I met with various believers, I read Baha'u'llah's writings, and I observed this new religion growing and spreading throughout the land. Baha'u'llah's vision for the future was magnificent. He wanted nothing less of his followers than to transform the world itself. He taught that all men have been created to carry forward an ever-advancing civilization. And he said, "It is not for him to pride himself who loveth his own country, but rather for him who loveth the whole world. The earth is but one country, and mankind its citizens." And this is what touched me the most: their love, their deep love for one another, for all humanity, women and men equal in all respects, people of all colors, all backgrounds, all walks of life, united in harmony. In the 1800s, there was nothing quite so radical as this. Not in England, not in America, not in any place I traveled did I encounter a community so warm and self-embracing as this. Ultimately, I was invited to meet with Baha'u'llah in person. I was one of just a few Westerners who had that chance. I took a few contemporaneous notes of that experience, which were later published, and I'd like to share a little bit from my notes with you, if I may. The face of him on whom I gazed, I can never forget, though I cannot describe it. Those piercing eyes seemed to read one's very soul. Power and authority sat on that ample brow. No need to ask in whose presence I stood, as I bowed myself before one who is the object of a devotion and love which kings might envy and emperors sigh for in vain. A mild, dignified voice bade me be seated, and then continued, "Praise be to God that thou hast attained. Thou hast come to see a prisoner and an exile. We desire but the good of the world and the happiness of the nations. Yet they deem us a stir up of strife and sedition, worthy of bondage and banishment. That all nations should become one in faith, and all men as brothers, that the bonds of affection and unity between the sons of men should be strengthened, that diversity of religion should cease, and differences of race be annulled. What harm is there in this? Yet so it shall be. These fruitless strifes, these ruinous wars shall pass away, and the most great peace shall come." I hope that his vision will become a reality.